All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Roger Zelaya. I'm the head of brokerage here at Radius Agent, and today we're having a quick training on the RPA from a buyer's agent perspective. When you're representing buyers, we'll talk about as is, included, excluded, repair requests, timelines, contingencies, and more. Now, if I will, this class is usually 16 hours. Like if we really want to dive deep into the RPA, I have a class that I've done in the past, and it's 8 hours about buyer's agent, 8 hours about listing agent, but we don't have that much time. So I'm going to skip through a lot of this information. However, if you have any questions, feel free to just yell your name and ask the question, and we'll address it. Hopefully we can get to all of the paragraph numbers that I want to talk about. So some stuff, like I said, I'm going to skip, like disclosure agency. We all know what that is, right? We all know how to fill that out. We all know, date prepared and the property address, who the buyer is, etc. So I'm skipping through this information. The offer price, which is $1 million, closing in 30 days. The deposit amount, $10,000, which is about 1% of the $1 million as they're going to go get a loan for $900,000. It's going to be a conventional loan unless some of these are clicked over here. So let me see if I can. Give me one sec, guys. Okay, so that's going to be the balance of down payment is $90,000, right? Now, here is where the meat and potatoes comes in, right? So the seller payment to cover buyer expenses and costs. What I've done is I have filled in some, fake information. So for example, if your buyer is, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll come back.
If your buyer is requesting a seller credit, right, that would go here. And if you notice, if I click it off, it takes it off. So in this case, we're asking for $4,000, but we can also ask for $6,000, right? It just depends. G2, right, and this is paragraph 3. G2 talks about other seller credits and payments, right? So for example, if you know that there is a termite report and it has section 1 information and it's going to cost $1,000 in this example, right? You would put it here. These two, G1 and G2, are not for your commission, okay? Keep in mind that June of this year, the RPA has changed. So in this case, if the section 1 clearance from Top Termite, which is the termite company that I made up, whether it's $1,000 or $3,000, right? So you don't want to put this because this is very specific for section 1 clearance, right? Or perhaps some other credit. Do not put it together with the closing cost because the termite section 1 clearance is not a closing cost. This is G3 is where your seller payment to compensate buyer's broker. This is where you would put in the commission that you have negotiated with your buyer, right? It could be 3%, it could be 2%, it could be $1,000, right? Just depends on what you negotiated on the BRBC. Make sure that you have a buyer representation agreement prior to showing the property, okay? Because the seller and escrow they don't have to, but they may request it. And if you don't have it, or if you have it incomplete, you will not get paid, okay? So, and we'll have a class on buyer representation agreement. And just to kind of give you a quick synopsis of it, I had a buyer's agent call me on a Saturday. It was my one of my child's birthday at 8 p.m. And I picked up the phone, and basically she said that her BRBC, that the seller was not going to pay her commission, which was $2.4 million at 2.5%, because her BRBC was completed incorrectly. So keep that in mind, right? If in doubt, call me. Okay. We'll talk about, I'm sorry, continuing on, right? These are all fill in the blanks. Let's talk about contingencies at a high level. We'll get into the details in a minute, right? If in a perfect world, a buyer's agent will pick up the phone and hopefully the listing agent will pick up, right? And say, hey, look, I'm going to send you an offer. What kind of terms are you looking for, right? Because they may say, if they call me and I am the listing agent, I will say, look, like 17 days for a loan is going to be a long time. I need you to shorten that. So call your loan officer and find out, can you guys do it in 12 or 14 days, right? Can he get the appraisal done in 12 or 14 days? So as a listing agent, I will say those things. As a buyer's agent, of course, we want to leave all of this defaulted to the 17 days. However, you want your offer to get accepted, right? So pick up the phone, talk to the listing agent, find out what kind of terms they're looking for, make sure your buyer is okay with it, make sure that the lender can perform, etc. But we want to, as a buyer's agent, of course, we want to leave all of these to defaulted at 17 days, okay? Time of possession, it's usually when it records, right? Typically, like if it records at 10 a.m., most buyers are at work, so they're not really gonna, take possession of the property. Documents, the seller delivery of documents needs to be within 7 days. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Just yell out, Roger, and I'll stop, right? This one is a miss a lot of times, right? That the seller must install smoke detectors and CO2 detectors and water heater bracing, right? And they need to do that within 7 days. Now keep in mind that if your appraiser goes to the property on day 5, they may not be installed. So I always make sure, if I'm representing a buyer, hey, does every room have smoke alarms, and do we have a smoke CO2 detector, right? One interesting, well, not interesting, but one of the things I also wanted to point out is when you're reading these paragraph numbers, right? So for example, investigation of property, it tells us over here a paragraph number, right? So if you want to expand on whatever topic you're talking about, for example, the loan, right? That would be paragraph 8A. Appraisal would be 8B. If you're talking about investigation of property, there's 2 paragraphs that talks about that, 8C and paragraph 12, right? Let's continue on. Okay, time of possession, we talked about that. Seller delivery of documents. Okay, this one is a very important paragraph because it is paragraph. I'm sorry, this is included and excluded, and I do get a lot of phone calls about this, right? And keep in mind that the vast majority of questions that most agents have when they call me are going to be in the residential purchase agreement. So if you have an RPA saved as a PDF, for whatever reason, CAR locks it and you cannot do any searches, right? But what I do is I pull up an RPA on CAR forms and I will look for the keyword that you're looking for, right? Like included or excluded, or like, one question could be drapes. Are drapes included, right? And look, I found drape, not drapes, right? So, and then I can read paragraph 9, included and excluded from the sale, right? And there's drapery shutters, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I wanted to show you how I use the RPA to look for answers. Okay, let's go back over here. Okay, so stove, like most of the time it is implied, right, that the stove is included in the sale of the home, but not always, because it's not a requirement that in order for you to sell a house, it must have a stove. It doesn't have to have a stove. So you want to ask for the stove here. If you want the refrigerator, right? If you want the wine refrigerator, whatever it is that your buyer wants, add it on here. Now, let me explain something interesting to you. And that is, let's say that on $1 million property, which in California is not a lot today, right? But maybe you are dealing with a 1.8 or $3.5 million home, and your buyer wants the stove that is at the property, and that stove happens to be a Viking stove and a Viking refrigerator, which I mentioned that brand because it's expensive, right? And if you click on stove and refrigerator here, and when you go do the final walkthrough, there is no Viking stove and there is no Viking refrigerator. So the question is the seller obligated to give you the Viking stove and the Viking fridge? And I'm going to make it even a little bit more tricky for you. On the MLS, it says the property has a beautiful Viking stove and a Viking refrigerator. And then on the open house flyer, it says the same thing. And let's just assume that you did not click on stove and refrigerator. Are those two items included or excluded? Anybody, just throw out the answer.
It's excluded because you didn't ask for it.
That is correct. But on the MLS and the open house flyer, it said that it has a beautiful Viking stove and refrigerator, but you're right, it would not be included. Now, I'm going to make it a little bit more interesting here, and I'm going to click on those two. Now, is the Viking stove and refrigerator included or excluded?
Included.
Okay, the answer is incorrect. You have to. It is a stove is included and a refrigerator is included unless put on here.
It's specified what type it is.
Specify Viking
Right.
stove, right? Or something like that, right? Viking stove and refrigerator.
Yeah.
That feels like a bait and switch, because if it's included in their marketing and specifically they actually mention the brand, I mean, I have never gone as far as including the brand like that. I've never had anybody switch. I don't know. I did have a refrigerator switched out once. I guess it could happen, but I think it's bad business. It feels like bad business.
Athene, I agree with you 1,000%, but let's look at the contract, right? Look at paragraph 9, included, excluded. Note to buyer and seller. I'm reading 9A. This is why, it says this is why it's important to do these classes, right? Items included and excluded from the sale. 9A. Note to buyer and seller. Items listed as included or excluded in the MLS, flyers, marketing materials, or disclosures are not included in the purchase price or excluded from the sale unless specified in this paragraph or paragraph 3P. Or as otherwise agreed, any items included herein are components of the home and are not intended to affect the price. All items are transferred without seller warranty. So even if it is on the flyers and marketing materials, they're not included in the purchase price. Okay. So, but I agree with you. It happened to me one time where the stove was a nice, beautiful stainless steel stove. And then they gave me a used stainless steel stove because we just never, added on here what kind of stove it was. Right. So just be aware of that information. James Quintero, you have a question.
Hey, Roger, it's me, Chris Cruz. What if I don't place like a piano in the included area? Does that automatically tell, or would I not see a piano? Like, am I also asking for the piano to be excluded by me not placing it in the additional items?
So and we can talk about that, right? So the answer is a piano, a refrigerator are not included in the sale of the home. Those are considered personal property.
Right.
Let me give you and I'm going to give you even more tricky information, right? So the answer is if your buyer wants the piano, he should put it in additional items included, right? Black whatever brand piano in the living room, you want that to be included. But a piano is not included because that's considered personal property, right? So included, and we are going to look at paragraph 9 has information about that, right? So the answer to your question is no, a piano is not included. You would, if you want it, your buyer wants it, you have to put it in there.
Okay, so if we see the piano at close of escrow and I never listed it as an included item, then the contract reads that should be removed?
That's correct.
Okay.
So again, right, that's considered personal property. And let's see, personal. Let's find out where that information is at, right? Let's see, seller's not gonna, okay. Scope of duty shall not be responsible to determine the fair market value for any personal property. So let's see, remove. Condition, okay, let's see, contingencies, I think it's on as is, remove obligation. So in the contract, I'd have to find it, but in the contract, it basically says that the buyer needs to remove all debris and personal property. Let me see if I can find it. So it's under condition, right? Paragraph 7, right? All debris and personal property not included in the sale shall be removed by close of escrow or at the time of possession is delivered to the buyer. So to answer your question, yeah, that piano, and this comes up a lot, right? And we just have to find the paragraph number, because I always say, like, show me on the contract where it says I need to do that, right? And the answer would be 7B, and it's right here, debris, right? Okay, so let's continue on here. We are, okay. We'll talk about allocation of cost, right? Again, natural hazard, we want the seller to do that provided by any reliable. Optional wildfire, if you have that. Smoke alarms, I want the seller to install the smoke alarm, CO2 and water heater bracing. Government required point of sale. I'm not very familiar with Northern California, but I know the city of Los Angeles has a 9A report that basically they look for deficiencies for earthquakes, and 99% of the time, they're going to be deficiencies that need to be fixed. So if I'm representing a buyer in the city of Los Angeles or surrounding cities, I am going to ask for the seller to pay for the government required point of sale. And most importantly, the government required point of sale corrective remedial actions, right? For those of you that don't know, we do have an escrow company. So escrow fee is going to each pay their own. We do have Radius Escrow. Title company, we want the seller to pay, and the company is going to be whatever your title rep is, your favorite title rep is. County transfer tax, will be the seller. In this case, I don't know why the buyer's there, but you want the county transfer tax to be paid by the seller. Northern California, some cities, my understanding is they have a city transfer tax. The vast majority of cities in Southern California do not. We certainly want the HOA certification fee, the HOA fee for preparing disclosures for the HOA. We want the seller to pay that. HOA transfers fees are going to be the seller. And I always like to get a home warranty for my buyers, okay? Let's continue on. Okay, so let's talk about included, excluded, because that comes up a lot, right? Which is paragraph 9. And I'm going to give you guys a trick question. And the question is the following. Let's say that there is an iPad on the kitchen counter laying around, and then when you guys go see the house, there's an iPad on the kitchen counter. And then when you guys do the inspection, it's on the couch. And that iPad is dedicated to the pool to turn on the lights, to turn the cleaning on, to if it has a waterfall, to turn on and turn off the waterfall. The question is that iPad that's laying around included or excluded from the sale? Just blurt it out.
Excluded.
Excluded.
Okay, the answer is in paragraph 9. It is not excluded. It is included.
Like I was gonna say included, yeah.
Yeah, because it is I said it's dedicated, right? And it was a trick question, guys. It's a dedicated iPad for the pool, even though like my phone, right, is not included in the sale, and neither is my iPad that's laying around downstairs. But if it is dedicated, then it is included, okay?
It's like garage door openers. It's like garage door openers, right?
That's correct. It's like garage door openers, right? So let's read this real quick. It says security system includes any devices, hardware, software, or control units used to monitor and secure the property, including but not limited to any motion detector, door alarms, or any other equipment utilized for such purpose. If checked in paragraph 3P, all such items are included in the sale, whether hardwired or not. Home automation includes any electronic devices and features included, but not limited to thermostat, control, kitchen appliances not otherwise excluded, and lighting system that are connected, hardwired or wirelessly, iPad, to a control unit, computer, tablet, phone, or other smart device, right? Any smart home devices and features that are physically affixed to the property, and also existing light bulbs that are included in the sale. So in other words, that was a trick question to you guys, right? The iPad, and I said it's in the kitchen counter and then it's in the couch, but it is dedicated, right?
Right.
Then it says here, non-dedicated devices, if check in paragraph 3, all smart home security system control devices that are included in the sale, except for non-dedicated personal computer tablet. But remember that tablet, the iPad, is dedicated to the pool. So anything I want to do to the pool, I have to go through the iPad, right? So that iPad would be included. However, let's say that is the latest and the greatest iPad. And when you guys walk in and do the VP, it is an iPad 3 from, 8 years ago. Is that acceptable?
I would think as long as it works for the pool, as long as they get it organized where the pool and everything else is working on it, I would think that would be acceptable.
That's correct. And it's kind of like the fridge, right? So make sure you guys specify once you find out about it, right? If you want to protect your buyer, certainly. The other, any questions on included, excluded, right? A lot of their California Association of Realtors has gone above and beyond to try to think about, and that's why they keep updating it, right? Because there's a litigation or a question, then they add it onto the contract, right? And that's paragraph 9. Let's talk about let's see, paragraph 7B, which is as is. This is another question, right? Whereas 7B, right? Condition of property on closing, unless otherwise agreed, property shall be delivered as is in its present physical condition as of the date of the acceptance. The property, including pool, spa, landscaping, is to be maintained in, that's the key word, substantially the same condition as on the date of acceptance, except as specified in paragraph 9C. So I don't know if you guys remember, if you've been in the business for a while, but we were going through a drought, and during this drought, people would maintain their grass in the front, nice and green, but the moment they got an offer accepted, then they would let the grass die. and that was quite a problem back then. I think I have some comments in the chat, so let me look. Hi, okay. Somebody said excluded. Does a contract address keys and associated with a condo complex like pool mailbox? Yes, it does. Again, right? I'm going to type in keys, and it says here, right, right? That's how I find answers when people ask me, right? Seller shall close of escrow unless otherwise agreed, and even if the seller remains in possession, provide keys, passwords, codes, and or means to operate all locks, mailboxes, security systems, alarm, home automations, internet and internet connected devices included in the purchase price, garage door openers, and all items included in either paragraph 3P or 9. If the property is a condominium or located in a common interest development, seller shall be responsible for securing or providing any such items for association amenities, facilities, and access. Buyer may be required to pay a deposit in the homeowners association to obtain keys to accessible HOA. So the answer is yes. That was for Tara. Jose. Okay, got it. So those are it. So let's talk about what kind of investigations can the buyer do. Let me give you guys a phone call that I got. The listing agent is upset because my buyer sent a termite guy to go do an inspection, and the listing agent said that the buyer has no right to send an inspector for termite to the property. True or false?
False.
False.
False. That is correct. And it is on paragraph 12, right? We're not going to read it because we're running out of time. I want to get to paragraph 14. Let's see, paragraph 12, buyer investigations. They could do home inspection. They could do wood destroying pests and organisms, right? That's termite. And it kind of goes on to all of the kind of things. In Northern California, it's sewer lateral, right? In Southern California, that's not very common. Let's see. Okay, let's talk about, before we get into timelines, because that's very time consuming, I want to talk about title investing, okay, which is on paragraph 13. People will call me and say, hey, I want to protect my buyer. I understand that, the seller has mortgages and probably some liens on the property. So I want to add an addendum saying, seller to deliver to buyer a title free of any encumbrances, including but not limited to blah, 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 right? So think about this, guys. When I am not a fan of addendums, because my answer is, if you need an addendum, there's probably a form for that, right? So give you an example, right? Seller to remain in possession 3 days after COE. There's a form for that. And the title issue that we are talking about, right? It's on the purchase agreement, and that is on 13B. Condition of title. Title is taken in its present condition, subject to all encumbrances, easements, covenants, conditions, and restriction rights and other matters, whether a record or not, as of the date of acceptance, except for monetary liens of record, unless the buyer is assuming those obligations, right? So you don't have to put that in there. If you ever want to do an addendum, stop, think about my saying. There's probably a form for that. And if in doubt, call me. I'll help you find the form, because addendums can be, because we're not lawyers and we're not attorneys, addendums can be and will be interpreted different ways if you don't use the correct legalese, and ChatGPT is not legalese, okay? Let's talk about repairs, which is paragraph 15, before we get into paragraph 14. So repairs shall be completed to the final verification of property unless otherwise agreed. Repair to be performed at seller's expense. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to let you guys know, can the seller himself do the repairs? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Does it have to be a licensed, bonded, and insured general contractor or electrical contractor?
No.
No. The repairs just need to be repaired, right?
Right.
Paragraph 16, final verification of property. This is a big one that a lot of people call me on and say, like, look, the buyer never did the final walkthrough, but they're recording today. And so, like, okay, it's not an issue, right? If from a listing agent perspective, they were supposed to, the buyer's agent was supposed to do the final walkthrough. They decided not to do it, and that's on the buyer's agent, but it is not a contingency to closing the transaction, right? Final verification of condition, buyer shall have the right to make a final verification of property condition within the time specified in paragraph 3J, 3 days, right? Not as a contingency of the sale, but solely to confirm the property is maintained pursuant to paragraph 7B, similar condition, right? Repairs have been completed as agreed, and seller has completed with the seller's obligations under this agreement, right? Let's talk about paragraph 18 and then 25. 18 is the scope of duty, 18B, right? This is a big one, guys. It doesn't specifically talk about the avid. We're going to have a class on the avid, but the scope of duties basically says buyer and seller acknowledge and agree that agent, that's you, does not decide what price to pay or what price should be accepted, does not guarantee the condition of the property. That's a big one. We still get, litigation of like, you guys didn't tell me this, you guys didn't tell me that. Does not guarantee the performance or adequacy or completeness of inspection services, etc. Right? What we are not responsible on I'm on 7 VII the agent shall not be responsible for identifying the location of boundary lines or other items affecting title. If you're a rural, this is very common. I get phone calls and I say, hey, do you know where the markers would be? Well, first of all, I'm not at the property, number one, and number two, we are not responsible to tell the buyer where those boundaries are at. They're going to have to do a survey to get that done. Okay, so, and then let's talk about definitions before we get into timelines, because most of the answers to you guys' questions is on paragraph 14. Okay, definitions, number 25. Let me give you guys an example. I'm going to use Athene because I know you. And Athene, I am the listing agent and you are the buyer's agent. And I call you Friday at 7 p.m. and I say, hey, Athene, guess what? Congratulations. We have your offer signed. I'm out at dinner right now, but congratulations. We're going to open escrow Monday. And I'll send it over to you later on today when I get home, maybe about 10 p.m. And the offer does not come to Athene until Monday at 7 in the morning. When do my timeline start? When I called Athene on Friday or Monday?
On Monday.
Why?
It's when it's after it's after receipt, and that's why we always want to confirm receipt when we're sending a fully executed contract, because that's actually when the timeline begins. So that's why there's always confirmation. We want to receive confirmation of receipt of So I would say Monday. That's
Yep.
when.
You are correct, Athene. I want you guys to remember that that's very common. Athene, I told you on Friday, so Friday is day 0. The answer is no. And where is it, right? It's on paragraph 25, letter K, deliver or delivered or delivery of documents unless otherwise agreed means and shall be effective upon personal receipt of the document by the buyer or seller or their authorized agent. Personal receipt means a copy of the document or applicable link to the document in possession. So yes, it has to be delivered, right? Also,
Yes.
Another question that I get is counting days, right? And again, the definitions are in here. What does acceptance mean? We're not going to go over it, but what is authorized agent, close of escrow, counting days? I encourage you to write this down and do paragraph 25, letter I, like India, counting days, because there's a lot of confusion. I give them a notice to perform on Friday, and Monday is a holiday, right? You guys got to read this paragraph number, but if you gave it to them Friday, that's day 0. So Saturday is day 1, Sunday is day 2. They cannot perform on Sunday. Monday is a holiday. They cannot perform on Monday. If you give them a notice to perform, then Tuesday morning is the earliest that you can take action, whether it was a demand to close or a notice to buyer to perform. Okay, the last couple of them that I want to do, and then we'll spend some time on the other ones is liquidated damages, which is paragraph 29. Let's see. Okay, paragraph 29. I get a lot of calls on this one, and let's say that it is a $1 million purchase price, like it is in this example. And it basically says that the liquidated damages, we're going to read it. If buyer fails to complete this purchase because of buyer's fault, seller shall retain as liquidated damages the deposit actually paid. If the property is a dwelling no more than 4 units, one of which the buyer intends to occupy, then the amount retained shall be no more than 3% of the purchase price. Any excess shall be returned to buyer. Release of funds will require mutual signed release instructions from both buyer and seller, judicial decision, arbitration award. At the time of any increased deposit, buyer and seller shall sign a separate liquidated damages provision incorporating the increased deposit as liquidated damages on CAR Form DID. So it says if the buyer fails to complete this purchase because of buyer's fault, seller shall retain as liquidated damage the deposit actually paid. Okay. So in this example, it'd be $10,000. Can the seller request 3% of the purchase price as liquidated damages? Anybody?
I don't think so.
No, because the way that this is, just to reread this, it says liquidated damages to the seller shall be the deposit or 3%, whichever one is less, right? So if we had $50,000 as an EMD or as a deposit, what is the maximum that the seller can keep?
3%.
3%, which would be 30,000, right?
Right.
So, but in this case, they would keep the 10,000 and then it ends there. And that's why it's important to, initial the liquidated damages. We'll talk about mediation real quick and then arbitration. If your seller wants to mediate or your buyer wants to mediate, they have to go to paragraph 30 and go here, consumermediation.org. That is a website that CAR provides to do mediation, right? And arbitration disputes, you may or may not want to sign this. It's really up to you. So the way that arbitration is, mediation means let's go talk about it. Mr. Seller and buyer, they both talk about it. The mediator is usually a retired real estate broker like myself or one of you guys. And if the mediator, agrees with one party and the other party disagrees, then the next step is go to arbitration. And if this is initialed, then we agree that whatever the arbitrator says goes. And the reason why these paragraphs are in here is because it's very expensive to have a lawyer, right? So arbitration is non-threatening. It's just, buyer and seller across the table from each other, and they have a couple of agents in there. James Quintero, you have a question.
Can you have the buyer or the seller sign mediation but not arbitration?
Yes, which means we go to mediation, but we did not sign the arbitration. So now we could sue each other because we disagree. The arbitration is way less expensive than litigation. And I'll give you an example on a deal that we have.
Choose to arbitrate. Can you still choose to arbitrate even if it's not signed after mediation? Let's say mediation didn't work, and then you're like, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to sue each other, or let's choose to arbitrate.
That depends
The
on
answer,
the party. That would depend on the party.
Yeah, correct. It would depend on the parties, right? If we both agree, like, hey, let's go to arbitration because it can be cheaper, then the answer would be yes. But one party could say no because they're not obligated to do it because they didn't sign paragraph 31.
Right.
Okay, awesome. We got 15 minutes to cover the most extensive paragraph, which is paragraph 14. Okay. The timelines are in there on paragraph 14, how the buyer can cancel, how the seller can cancel, when can I give them a notice to buyer to perform, when can I give them a demand to close, and all that kind of stuff, right? So I want to point out to you, I get this phone call at least once or twice a week. And the answer and the question goes like this: look, Roger, I'm representing the buyer and I sent a repair request to the listing agent, and it's been 3 days, 5 days, a week, and they have not responded to my repair request. And now they gave me a demand, a notice to buyer to perform, and I'm not going to release contingencies until we have an answer for the repair request. And my answer is 100% of the time is, let's read paragraph 14B2. And I'm reading over here, paragraph 14B2. It says buyer may, within the time specified in paragraph 3L, 17 days, 10 days, whatever it is, request that the seller make repairs or take any other action regarding the property via car form RR. Here is what really is terrible. Seller has no obligation to agree or to respond to buyer's request. If the seller does not agree or does not respond, buyer is not contractually entitled to have the repairs or other requests made, and may only cancel based on the contingencies of this agreement. So, home inspection happens, repair request goes out, listing agent ignores you, doesn't return your calls, doesn't even want to talk about the repair request because paragraph 14B2 says you don't have to, which means the buyer has one option, two options. One is, fine, I'll take the property as is, or option two is, here is a cancellation because you didn't want to do the repair request. Questions on that? James Quintero. And I know it's not you, James, but
It is me actually. So when it comes to inspections, when is it appropriate to ask the seller to pay for inspections that you paid for if they're not willing to either do a repair request or do like conditions to an appraisal?
yeah, good question. And that is in here. Let's see, cost. I want to say it's on paragraph 9, but I'm not 100% sure. Or is it paragraph 12? Buyer cost, expense.
Roger, I think it's in the cancellation agreement.
Yeah, it is in the cancellation agreement, but I want to show you guys. I think it's paragraph 12. Let's find out. You're right. It is on the cancellation agreement, but paragraph 12, where did I miss it? Yeah, no, right here. Buyer shall, within the time specified, have the right at buyer's expense, unless otherwise agreed to conduct inspections, investigations, tests, surveys. And so whatever it is that the buyer did, it is
That's
the
on them.
buyer's cost.
That's on them. Yeah, it's their on their, that's their
It is
responsibility.
not the seller to reimburse. Now, if you can negotiate that on the cancellation, right, which is that's a whole different issue. You can click on like, hey, you know what? Because of you, Mr. Seller, I wasn't able to close, and the seller agrees to pay those fees, then that's different. But the answer to your question, to be very objective, is the buyer's expense.
So just curious, let's say you got it, it's the buyer's expense, they get their inspections done, you submit a request for repair. Is the buyer obligated to send them the reports? And if so, are the sellers allowed to use those reports moving forward in their disclosure packet?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
the buyer, at no cost to the seller, must provide the reports. And I think that's also on paragraph 12, but I got to find it.
Yeah, because it becomes part of a disclosure. All the reports from previous sales become part of disclosures, and you have to disclose that, especially when you find mold and things like that. Those have to be disclosed when you know next buyer. Am I correct?
Yeah, correct. Let me. It is in the contract. that the buyer at no expense to the seller provide to seller. Let me see, to seller. Let me find out. Yeah, I'd have to find it, but the answer is, and who's asking the question? Was it you, James?
Yes, it was me.
Okay, Quintero, and the question was provide.
Am I getting written up?
Yeah, no, I'm writing it down because I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna send it to you. Provide this reports to seller. The reason why I know is because I asked as a listing agent for reports and they told me no. And then I said, look, here's a screenshot of the contract. You have to provide it to me. I just don't have it off the top of my head and we're running out of time. Slevania, sorry to mispronounce your name. Go ahead.
That's okay, Roger. It's Svetlana. I know at least in San Francisco, because we use our own contract, we don't use the car. You provide the inspection report only if you're requesting repairs. If you're not requesting repairs, the listing agents don't want to see that report because they don't want to know what you, the buyer, have found if you're not requesting any kind of
That's interesting.
They have said, I don't want to see it. Don't send it to me, because if you do, then they're now obligated to include them in future disclosures if you pull out of the agreement.
Yeah, so you are correct. The RPA in San Francisco is completely different. Now, you as the buyer's agent, right, can give it to the seller if they ask for it, right? But some listing agents is like, you're going to cancel anyway, dude. Nah, don't send it to me.
Exactly. They don't want to see it. They don't want to know about it. Don't tell me what's wrong.
And that's totally fine. Let's see. I'm trying to buy escrow, expense, non-delivery. Okay, removal buyer and assume liability and expense for the non-delivery of any reports, disclosures. Okay. I will have to find that for you. James, and I will get back to you. Okay, let's go back to paragraph 14 because paragraph 14 is so extensive, right? And we're running out of time. We got 7 minutes, guys.
You're doing a great job. I really appreciate everything you're doing. I mean, it's really eye-opener into a lot of stuff that, you think you know, but this is verification. This is fantastic.
It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And next week, Wednesday, we're going to have it from a listing agent perspective, right? Okay, so paragraph 14 is the time period, the removal contingencies and cancellation rights. We talked about that the buyer says, hey, fix this. They don't answer you. They can either take it as is or they can give them a cancellation, right? That's paragraph 14B2. Then let's talk about continuation of contingency, right? Even after the end of the time specified in 3L, 17 days, and before the seller cancels, if at all, pursuant to paragraph 14C, buyer retains the right in writing to either remove the remaining contingencies or cancel this agreement based on a remaining contingency. Once buyer's written removal of contingency is delivered to seller before the seller cancels, seller may not cancel this agreement based on that contingency. This is very common, guys. The seller got cold feet last minute, and the buyer has removed any and all contingencies, and now the seller does not want to sell. How can the seller cancel? The answer is can't. The buyer performed under the agreement and the property was sold the day that they accepted the offer. We were just waiting on inspections and funding of the loan, right? So that if your seller wants to cancel, make sure that you give them a notice to buyer to perform or a notice or a demand to close. We're going to talk about that briefly because we're running out of time. The only time you can give a demand to close is after all of buyer's contingencies have been removed. Let me rephrase that. Only time that you can give a demand to close is only after the buyer has removed all contingencies from a listing agent perspective, right? Now, if the buyer has removed all contingencies and they have not closed, or they're delayed in closing and you don't have an extension time addendum, the only option you have is a demand to close. Let's say, for example, they always leave the loan as the last resort. And the seller is like, look, you're supposed to close Friday. Today is Wednesday. So I'm going to give you a demand to close. And the answer is no. You have to, and remember, they still have the loan contingency out. So you have to give them a notice to buyer to perform, which will give you then 2 days, and then you can cancel in 2 days. Because if you give them a demand to close, and I'm the buyer's agent, I'd be like, that's invalid, bro. Like, you're supposed to give me a notice to buyer to perform, and your demand to close is invalid. So understanding when you could do that, right? And again, paragraph 14 has all of this information. And seller right to cancel, right? Seller contingency, seller may cancel this agreement by good faith exercise of any seller contingency included in this agreement or otherwise agreed, so long as the contingency hasn't already been removed or waived. Let me tell you guys one more thing, right? You guys, everybody knows or should know that if the seller, I'm running out of time here. If the seller gives you contingencies, let me see, seller. Okay, so seller delivery of documents, okay, needs to be done within 7 days or whatever you put on here after acceptance, right? But let me go back over here. But look, review of seller documents, right? It's supposed to be 17 days. However, or 5 days after delivery, whichever one is later. And where can you find that information is on 14A. Guys, I want you to understand, I'm going to get to you, James, in a minute. I want you to understand, do not leave your avid, the buyer's agent or the listing agent's avid till the last minute, because the listing agent's avid now is considered a seller disclosure, even though it comes from you. So here's an example. You know, the buyer has removed all contingencies, and now, oh my gosh, last minute, here's my listing agent avid, and you disclose something on there that the buyer does not like, they can cancel. Do not leave your listing agent's avid to the last minute. James, go ahead.
He walked away. I think
I've never done that, by the way.
Never done the avid last minute?
No, never done that.
Of course not, me either. And I'm the broker.
Just curious about informational access to the property. Can you just explain a little bit more what that means? Because I feel like that's kind of a little ambiguous to me. I just want to know what that means.
Yeah, very good. That's another common question that I get. Hey, the listing agent does not want to give us access to the property because the buyer went to, I don't know, whatever, to look at some furniture, and they have some measurements, but they're not giving us access. My question is, what does the informational access to property mean? Let me give you an example. If you put on here 15 days, right, for the investigation of property, but this one was left blank, you have 17 days to go and access the property for informational purposes, right? They cannot prevent you from it, right? And I will then tell the agent, like, hey, take a screenshot of this and say like, look, we have 17 days. So the informational access to the property basically means, like, you want to go and measure the master bedroom because they're buying, some furniture, and you have 17 days, but if 15 have already passed, you still have it. So that means, like, many agents on the listing agent will make this match. If this is 12, then we want this 12, because we don't want to bug the seller on day 16 that you want to access the property. So usually these two will match, but not always. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it says that it's not the purpose is not a contingency. Does that mean that after 17 days is up, that it's gone, or do we have to remove that contingency?
No, it is. So the purposes is not in contingency. In other words, like, well, you didn't give me information to the property. Here's a cancellation. You can't do that. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, so do we have to remove that then?
No.
Is that what gets removed from
No,
the?
it automatically gets removed after 17 days or 11 days, whatever it is that you put on here. But the seller has agreed to give you access to the property, right? No more than 17 days, or in this case, 11, right? Depending on what you put on there. So, and you cannot say, well, since you didn't give me access to the property and today is day 16, here's a cancellation. You cannot use that as a contingency, or it doesn't really give you the right to cancel. It's 11:01, guys. Like I said, we can dive deep into, we can do 1 hour just on paragraph 14, but this is a high level overview, and I wanted to touch on what's important. And any last minute questions before I let you guys go, because I gotta go to another meeting. And was this helpful?
Absolutely, 100%.
100%.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes,
Okey-dokey.
thank you, Roger. We appreciate it.
No, I know everything about the RPA. I know every word.
You also unlock some new fears. I'm never going to be delayed in getting my Avid in.
Right, me too. Well,
Yeah,
looking forward to next Wednesday, another
Yeah,
class.
yeah. Next Wednesday will be from the listing agent perspective, and hopefully we can get
Yay.
there. And thank you everyone for attending, and we'll talk soon.
You did a
Thank
great
you.
job. Thank you.
Anna.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.